I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant, question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. Today, we're doing a history lesson on Operation Mockingbird and how the media has been used by the American intelligence community for decades. You need to watch this one. The show starts now. The world according to Jesse.
In the early 1970s, Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward blew the lid off the Watergate scandal, exposing the secret and illegal activities of President Nixon and his administration. In 1977, Carl Bernstein blew the lid off another government scandal known as Operation Mockingbird. Bernstein published the article in Rolling Stone outlining how America's most powerful news media worked with the CIA to create propaganda and mislead the public. Now, according to CIA documents, for 25 years, more than 400 American journalists secretly carried out assignments for the Central Intelligence Agency. Some people did this in exchange for money, while others did this voluntarily. Among the participants were Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists and even famous correspondents. Assignments included intelligence gathering, publishing agency press releases as stories, shaping other stories, and even planting false information with foreign officials. The scheme also involved news executives, broadcast station chiefs, columnists, editors, publishers, commentators, photographers, and freelancers. The list goes on. The CIA also bankrolled foreign press services in English and in other languages. Jesse, it's no secret that the United States intelligence apparatus continues this cozy relationship today with major media outlets. So why don't we call these outlets state media, if that's pretty much what they're doing?
Well, yes, it is. And then when you look at it, you could also call it corporate media because corporations now run our government. Right. We are very much a fascist country today, in my opinion, run by corporations. So naturally, the corporations have the power now of the media and the government. You know, you got me on here, Brigitte, to give you examples and to give you knowledge. I'm going to go right now and give you some great knowledge, everybody out there, on what happened to me. Mm-hmm. When I came out of office in 2003, I was the hottest commodity out there. I was the voice of the independent. So a bidding war took place between CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. MSNBC won. I was supposed to have a 5-day-a-week show on 5 nights, I think in Rachel Maddow's spot. I think that's the one they had for me. But unfortunately, right before the Iraq War, we got a phone call wanting to know if I opposed the war, which I did, and then they asked if I'd switch my position, which I wouldn't, and subsequently they pulled my show and wouldn't let me on the air because of my resistance and my opposition to the Iraq War. Well, it turns out I was completely correct, right? The Iraq War is and was a complete disaster. What would the Middle East be like today if we hadn't invaded Iraq? Well, it didn't end there. MSNBC also had brought back Phil Donahue, who likewise opposed the invasion of Iraq. Phil was their highest-rated show, and yet he was yanked immediately. So both Phil Donahue and Jesse Ventura had the tape put across their mouths so they couldn't talk on opposition to the Iraq War. Now, what happened? They paid me all 3 years, and my contract was a very large one, and by paying me all 3 years, I had to honor the contract. I couldn't do any cable TV or no news programs. So in essence, they silenced me. Now you're telling me that's what our media should be like? There, you got a first-hand story right during the Iraq War of what our country did. Remember back, there was nobody speaking out against the Iraq War. Everybody in the media was totally for it.
I want to read some of the most important sections of Bernstein's article. Now, he writes, quote, from 1950 to 1966, 10 CIA employees were provided cover under the New York Times with arrangements that were approved by the newspaper's late publisher, Arthur Hayes Sulzberger. He also says CBS was unquestionably the CIA's most valuable broadcasting asset. CBS President William Paley and CIA Director Alan Dulles enjoyed an easy working and social relationship over the years. CBS provided cover for CIA employees, including at least one well-known foreign correspondent and several stringers. It established a formal channel of communication between the Washington bureau chief and the agency and allowed reports by CBS correspondents to routinely be monitored by the CIA. Correspondents even joined the CIA hierarchy for private dinners and briefings. Now, other compromised outlets named in the article are vast. This includes Newsweek, ABC, Time Magazine, The Washington Post, NBC, New York Herald Tribune, Saturday Evening Post, Hearst Newspapers, the Associated Press, Reuters, the list goes on. Jesse, even with all this evidence laid out, the Senate Intelligence Committee never questioned any of the people named or listed in these CIA files. Top agency officials convinced the committee to stop looking into the matter and even downplayed how large of an operation this was. What does this tell you?
It tells you they don't want to know, they don't want you to know that the CIA and our government and whoever pulls their strings are completely educating you. You are not hearing two sides of the story ever. You are hearing only their side of the story, which is always pro-war. And so that's how we've turned into this war country, this war empire, this war economy. And, you know, it's ridiculous, Brigida, that we've allowed this to happen, and the mainstream media of the United States of America should hang its head in shame, because they're supposed to be the fourth branch of government, and they are not.
All right. The CIA claims that Project Mockingbird ended, and maybe it did. But today, the government does not need to secretly maintain a relationship with the media because it can outright do it in public, and we see it every day. Now, MSNBC Morning Joe co-host Mika Brzezinski is the daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who served as national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter. According to Bernstein's reporting, Zbigniew Brzezinski was part of a four-man CIA task force between 1964 and 1965 that explored ways to beam American propaganda broadcasts to China. Now, other government officials who appear regularly on MSNBC include President Obama's press secretary, Josh Ernst, and former CIA Director John Brennan. In addition, Obama's national security advisor, Susan Rice, has just been added to the board of directors at Netflix, which won 2 Oscars in the past 2 years for its anti-Russia and anti-Syria documentaries. And CNN, of course, is no better. Former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, and former CIA Director, Michael Hayden, are now regularly on CNN programs. So it doesn't take a genius to understand why these people go on TV. Jesse, what do you think it is that they're doing there? What are they talking about?
What do you think? They're pushing their war agenda. That's what it's all about. These are the same people, too, Clapper and them, who sat in front of Congress, took an oath, and told us we weren't under surveillance. And then 4 weeks later, the Snowden revelations come along that we're all under surveillance. These are the biggest liars on the planet. They're paid to be liars. That's what the CIA's job is today, is to lie, basically. And you know, to the American people, they might tell the truth to the people they work for, but they certainly don't to us. They cover up everything. And, you know, this cozy relationship, it affects each and every one of us because it dictates our foreign policy, it dictates our economic policy. Let's face it, it basically dictates our government.
All right, talk about how this cozy relationship has affected the public. Is this why we don't see any actual news on the news? We just see people repeating the same things over and over again?
Absolutely. Mainstream media today is not news, it's entertainment. All they're there to do is entertain you. I mean, who cares that the president went out with a hooker? That's his business, and that's between him and his wife. Now, do I condone that type of behavior? Not a bit. But the point is, I want to hear something that affects me, not something that Donald Trump had an affair with a porn star, and that's the dominant thing, and they paid hush money to her. Oh, whoa, that must be a new revelation. Wow, that's never been done by a politician or person of power before, has it?
No.
You know, that stuff don't mean crap to me. I want to know stuff like why we're going to war in Syria and what gives the president the right to shoot rockets in there, violating our own Constitution and Bill of Rights.
All right, former FBI Director James Comey has been all over TV as well lately. Have you seen him? What do you think about him going on TV to sell books?
Well, that's what you do when you write a book. You know, I don't condemn him for that because I've done it 7 times. Whenever you write a book, they schedule you for a book tour and you do masses of media. That's how it's done. That's the business. I don't mind that at all. Have I listened to Comey? Not too much. You know, I don't put much credibility in what he says at all, just as I don't put any credibility in what our current president says. We got a real lack of credibility in all levels of our government, the status quo, as well as our supposed new government in there to drain the swamp. They got a lot of credibility problems, too. In other words, they're all a pack of liars.
All right, now this is my favorite. Talk about the generals who constantly go on network TV and give their commentary.
Well, of course, the generals are going to promote war. That's the only thing they know. That's their career. Their careers have been waging war. So they're going to give it to you from a warlike aspect. They may not deceive you, I don't know, but they're going to give you the perspective of why it's good to go to war, because that's what generals like to do. They like to go to war. They like to be in charge of war. To them, it's a massive chess game. It's a football game. My father, who had 6 bronze battle stars in World War II, once told me the best general you could find would be a great football coach, because war is essentially the same as a football game. You try to find weakness and exploit it and lead yourself to victory.
All right, it's time for a break. When we return, Jesse sits down with documentarian John Barber for more about Operation Mockingbird.
The world according to Jesse.
What'd you have for breakfast yesterday? Why would you pick those shoes? How fast is your Wi-Fi? What's your dog's name? Why'd you name him that? What's your biggest fear in life? Ever been on a hayride? When's the last time you read a book? What would you say if you ever met the Pope? Who's the best quarterback of all time? What's one topping that doesn't belong on a pizza? Now I've interviewed you too. Question more.
Mark Twain said it's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled. That could be why America is so divided now, because people have been fed fake news, paid for by corporate interests. They beat you down until you believe their fairy tales. Well, here's a story for you. It's called The Big Picture, and it's full of facts, not fiction. Question more.
The events of April 28, 1996 in the historic town of Port Arthur, Tasmania, forever changed the course of history here in Australia.
Where 35 souls lost their lives to a gunman's madness.
The massacre was the catalyst for the Australian government to enact massive and sweeping changes to their laws regarding the ownership, buying, and selling of firearms.
Maybe it's time for the United States to start looking outward for help.
I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant and question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. John Barber is the director of the documentary American Media and the Second Assassination of John F. Kennedy. He joins me now from Las Vegas to discuss how the CIA has been infiltrating mainstream media for decades to spy on journalists and control what we hear and see. In your documentary film, you talk about a CIA program called Operation Mockingbird or Project Mockingbird. When did this operation start, and what was its goal?
It began shortly after the inception of the Central Intelligence Agency. And to tell you how smart Jim Garrison was, in 1967, when he arrested Clay Shaw, he announced that he had solved the crime. And indeed, he had solved the crime. Not only did he investigate the crime, he investigated the origins of the CIA. And he says on camera, in the 10 years that he following the Clay Shaw trial, which he lost. He only lost part of it. He won part of it, which the media will never tell you about, and we'll get to that. But what happened is he investigated the CIA and the reasons for its development. He said Russia was never a threat to America because it lost 25 million people. And what was a threat was peace. The peace that was it was disrupting the military-industrial complex's profits. So they created the CIA, Garrison says, to create a new foreign policy which would put us into a state of perpetual war, where we are now. Gore Vidal predicted it, and so did George Orwell predict it. Project Mockingbird was begun in the middle 50s and overseen by Allen Dulles, who was head of the CIA, and their purpose, announced purpose, was to infiltrate all of American media for the purpose of creating and changing our minds about peace and developing a permanent war policy. The first fake war was a Cold War with the Soviet Union, according to Garrison. The second fake war that you're well aware of course, was the fake Gulf of Tonkin resolution that got us into Vietnam, and then later the fake weapons of mass destruction, which got us into Iraq. Jim Garrison solved the case. You know, in 1968, Governor, I was under contract to Westinghouse to be Merv Griffin's replacement when he went to CBS. My producer was going to be Roger Ailes. Roger and I used to have extensive conversations about the news. He was Nixon's media advisor at the time, and he said to me, John, it's not what you put on the news that changes the world. It's what you don't put on the news that changes the world. And the world was changed by the fact that nothing about what Jim Garrison discovered was true about elements of the Central Intelligence Agency murdered our president. He says it on live television, and it was so powerful. You might remember. You know, I was now, the first
John,
critic in America.
Let me interrupt a second. We got to move forward here quick, and we don't have a lot of time. Do you think that Project Mockingbird continues today, or has it been discontinued? Where is it at now?
No, as a matter of fact, it's worse today, and it's stronger today. I mean, let me tell you how simple it is to solve this problem. You might remember when AT&T was ordered by the Justice Department to break apart because it was a monopoly, and they did. We now have a dozen successful phone companies. You might remember when the major studios owned theaters, and they were told they were a monopoly, get rid of them. The worst president of the United States was Bill Clinton. He signed NAFTA, which sends our jobs overseas. He repealed Glass-Steagall, which caused the economic collapse in 2008. And worse, he destroyed democracy by signing the Communications Act. When John Kennedy was killed, Governor, a company could only own 5 stations in America. There were 1,500 different owners of television and radio stations. With the Communications Act that Clinton signed, yes.
John, do you think over the last 55 years, what has come forward? Why does the media continue to push the Oswald killed Kennedy scenario when so much evidence has come out now that takes it far beyond Lee Harvey Oswald?
Well, because that's how they profit. You know, there's an opening sequence in the film, Governor, that's just astounding. It shows you how $18 billion was spent by the media to cover the O.J. Simpson trial. $2 billion was spent on the John Benet Ramsey trial, still an open case, the most investigated unsolved murder in America. And then another $8 billion was spent on the Bill Clinton trial about all his peccadillos with Monica Lewinsky. In the O.J. trial, 12 people were made stars investigating that crime. Nancy Grace, Greta Van Susteren, and many others. However, when John Kennedy was killed in broad daylight, high noon in Dallas, Texas, the Zapruder film shows that the shot came from the front, and Jim Garrison says on camera, John, there were those in the media who assisted the government when this happened, and it began with Dan Rather, who lied about the direction of the head on the third and fatal shot. The amount of money spent by the American media to cover that crime, zero. Only $8,000 was spent, and that was Ramparts magazine, Playboy magazine, and the Los Angeles Free Press. And Larry Flint bought the Los Angeles Free Press, offered $1 million reward to anyone who would help solve the murder of John Kennedy. Months later, he was shot in the back and crippled. Walter Cronkite and Lyndon Johnson offered no such reward. And the media today are propagandists. Clinton has put 95%. Yes.
John, now let's move to right now today. Is there evidence suggesting that the U.S. intelligence are still infiltrating the media, or do they totally control it today?
They absolutely and totally control it. And these documents supposedly to be released by Trump are absolutely, totally meaningless. Because, Governor, you know as somebody who was in the military, the intelligence agencies don't keep diaries that say we did it. The two most important documents are already in the film. When Garrison arrested Clay Shaw, 1967, we have the document from the CIA that orders them to come to Clay Shaw's aid. Otherwise, Jim Garrison will get a conviction. The second most important document, because the Warren Commission report was dismantled by Mark Lane in his rusted judgment. And by the way, it wasn't printed in this country. He had to flee to England to get it published, and he only got $1,500. Then a lot of people came out of the woodwork at their own expense. Sylvia Marr, many of them did wonderful work disproving the Warren report. Well, that is all over with now. You look now, you can't go to a hockey game, a baseball game, any game, a basketball game, without seeing military all over the place. And Jim Garrison said it. John, he said this in 1980. I got the only interview with Mr. Garrison. He said, John, it's like Germany in the 1930s. Well, it's worse today because the Pentagon pays these National Hockey League and yes.
How do we wake the people up? How do we wake them up? Because it seems nobody cares whether, you know, first of all, they broke the law. All these documents were supposed to be released. It shows me clearly the alphabet agencies run the government when the president won't even abide by the law. Unfortunately, John, we're out of time. I would love to spend more time with you. Will you come back again when and if they release the rest of the documents?
I will be so glad to come back here and talk to you anytime, Governor. Listen, good things only happen in the world from the beginning of time and civilization. It's the black sheep who do it. Galileo, Copernicus, all of these troublemakers. Jesus only had 12 followers. Only 3% of Americans fought the revolution. Castro only had 10 people in a rowboat. You are one of these wonderful black sheep who is helping inform the world. And as an atheist, I thought I would never say this to anybody, but Governor, God bless you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. John Barber, a great director and a man out there who's living the cause, living the life, and seeking the truth. Thank you. The world according to Jesse.
Okay, Governor, let's turn to the viewers. Now, we asked people online to weigh in. whether they think the CIA really discontinued Project Mockingbird, and whether they think the government agencies are still paying, threatening, and planting information with journalists so that they publish propaganda. Chris says to some extent. However, I think with more corporate ownership of the media and the long-term alliance between the CIA and big business, this venture is self-sustaining with very little need for any outside influence. What do you think?
I think he's right on with that. I spoke of that earlier in the show. I said now that corporations run our country and they run our judicial system, they run our elected officials, they run the media, and all of that is, we're fascists today. Let's tell it like it is. We are the fascist states of America. I've been screaming that for the last couple of years. And in a fascist thing, fascism, part of it is controlling the media and what the public gains in knowledge. And there's no doubt about it that our government subjects us to huge amounts of censorship.
Brad says, of course they do. Why would they have ended Project Mockingbird? There is still less objectivity and impartiality in journalism than ever before, and media outlets and publications have become increasingly consolidated in fewer hands. Several corporations control 90% of the media.
And that's exactly correct. The only good thing is the corporations don't control RT, and they don't control Jesse Ventura. So I can still speak freely on RT, and, we're battling our government. They claim the Vietnam veteran governor and mayor is a foreign agent. Well, that's cool. I'll be a foreign agent, but I'll be one that tells the truth.
Thanks for watching. Send us your comments on social media for a chance to be featured in an upcoming episode. We love hearing from you.
And remember, when the government lies, the truth, yes, the truth, becomes a traitor. Stay vigilant, people.
The world according to Jesse.